Okay.
What is up, brothers and sisters? Welcome to the Mitch Gray Show. So happy that you're joining us. I am your host, Mitch Gray, author of How to Hire and Keep Great People and leadership consultant. And so make sure you subscribe to the show, spread the word. Please like the show, review the show, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you leave us a review. Those really help us spread the word and help more people. We have some great stuff coming for you in 2022. We have a new How to Hire and Keep Great People course launching. So more information on that to come. And be sure to check out our new website, recruitgreatpeople.com, to find some free resources and tools to build your dream team. Another great guest today. We have had a few conversations and talked on social media and via email. Really excited to have this guest on. So today I'm introducing to you Roxi Hewertson. Roxi, you are a leadership expert, speaker, author, teacher, certified ICF PCC coach, and you have over 3 decades of experience in organizational consulting and leadership coaching. You're also the CEO of Highland Consulting Group, and let's get to the really good stuff, author of 2 highly acclaimed books, Hire Right, Fire Right, A Leader's Guide to Finding and Keeping Your Best People, and Lead Like It Matters, because it does. And that's the title of the book. I didn't add because it does. That's the title. And so, Roxi, welcome to the Mitch Gray Show.
Thanks, Mitch. I'm really excited to be here and be with your listeners today.
I love it. All of the things I just read about you tells us the underlying point. You are highly accomplished, highly knowledgeable, but beyond all of that in our conversations, I've just learned that you're just a wonderful person. And someday you and I are going to get to sit down and have a cup of coffee together. That's going to be our deal.
That'd be awesome. I'd love it.
Yes, I love it. So Roxi, we'd like to start off with a big question. We don't mess around on the Mitch Gray Show, get our listeners really in on the good stuff. So obviously with your titles of your book, and you and I have that's in fact how we met, through a mutual friend who heard about my book, knew about you. And my book is How to Hire and Keep Great People. Your book is Hire Right, Fire Right. We're aligned with our content, incidentally. And so you obviously touch on those subject matters, but it's been interesting, and we won't dive into this too deeply, but this is going to kind of go to your first thoughts, I'm sure. It's been interesting to really talk with business leaders, especially over the last 2 years. Hiring has always been an interesting subject to dance in. The last 2 years has made it even more interesting because many business leaders, maybe even listeners of our show, they're really dealing with new elements that they've never dealt with before. People are quitting jobs faster. I like to say the power is back in the hands of the employee, which is where it should be. The downside of that is many systems weren't created for the power to be in the hands of the employee, which is making it very difficult for many hiring leaders. And so you said something before the show that I think is really, really critical. And I'm going to ask it in the form of this. What do you think is really the most important element when a leader is considering hiring, when they're looking at their landscape of their team, regardless of size of team, and they're really sitting there thinking, okay, I've got to hire some people, but that takes a special mindset, and really to do it the right way, it takes the right mindset. And so what do you think is really the perfect ideology for someone to nurture and to grow within before even setting out to hire people? Let's start there.
Mitch, that's a really fundamental and excellent question. So when we were talking earlier, I want to make the point that when we're inviting people to join our organization, no matter how big or small, it's a relationship that will be the result. It's not a transaction. We're not going out to buy a piece of bread or a new car. We're needing to create a lasting relationship. So if you're going to think of a metaphor, think of a blind date. What do you want to know about that person before you decide to date them again or decide to have a long-term relationship with them? It's really important that we move away from thinking of hiring as a transactional activity. It's a relational activity. Does that make sense?
I love that aspect because it's oftentimes business leaders kind of get that picture when it comes to customers. They know that they need to nurture. They know that they need to kind of often be gentle and compassionate with that relationship regarding customers and clients, because they see those people naturally as repeats. I need that person to come back and buy something. And so it's almost like oftentimes I witness leaders put more effort into nurturing the relationship of customer clients than they do of their employees, because
Yeah,
they just assume that the employee is going to show back up, and they don't assume the customer is going to show back up. And really, what you're proposing is it doesn't matter what position the person holds, that nurturing needs to take place from the beginning and consistently.
absolutely. Because I mean, everybody knows that when you have employees that are engaged and they're happy and they're committed to the organization, then you end up getting loyal customers. But you don't start with the loyal customer and work your way backward. You start with the loyal employee and work your way forward. But before you even get there, how you set that up, how you go out there into the world and let them know that you have a job opening. I don't care whether it's a frontline person at McDonald's or it's a CEO. The concepts are the same. This is a relationship, and how you're going to communicate what it is you want, what it is you need in an honest way, in a clear way, in an inclusive way, is going to set you up to draw in the right people versus the wrong people.
So when someone is designing, let's back up a little bit. Someone could either be designing a new business or stepping into an existing business. Regardless of the situation, they're really creating and carving out their role as a leader in that organization.
Right.
And let's say someone's in a hiring position, they're carving out their role. They're either creating a new culture or maybe launching from a current culture. What does this idea of removing a transactionary relationship to employees and making it more of a real human relationship, how does that partner with the culture that is either being created or might already exist?
That's a really great question. I talk about that quite a bit in my book in terms of business strategy. And of course, the leader sets the tone for the culture. But in terms of business strategy, if the leader does not believe, or the company or the organization of any kind does not believe that hiring is a business imperative, hiring right is a business imperative, then they'll screw it up more often than they won't. I mean, at least half the time. And I'm going to say this. What blows my mind is that there is not one person on this planet who's involved in a business who would settle for a 50% failure rate in any other part of the business.
Right.
And yet,
Right.
and yet this is just, I mean, it hasn't changed. Then that's at best. And recruiters, 40% failure rate. Generally, it's somewhere between 50 and 60% failure rate. Now, who would do that in any other part of the business? So this needs to be a business imperative, and it needs to be part of the culture that hiring right involves everybody. And it matters to the bottom line, like zippity doo dah to the bottom line.
Yes, that's exactly right. It impacts and ripple affects the bottom line almost immediately,
Yeah.
And I like to tell people constantly that the smaller your team, the more important getting hiring right becomes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you have a team of 10 to 20 people, that one bad hire or wrong hire, it doesn't mean it's a bad person, you just hired wrong. That can impact incredibly, rather than a team of 1,000 people. You can kind of afford to make a few more mistakes, but that small team, it really matters that you get that person, the right person in the right place, doing the right job.
Yeah, well, even if you have 1,000, I agree with you, number one. And number two, but you're not surprised. But number two, if you take the failure rate in 1,000-person company, it's going to have a massive impact.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So it's a percentage game. The bottom line is, it has to be a business imperative to hire right. And you need to figure out how to do that. And we've been really lazy as a culture.
Yes.
And I think worldwide, I think this is a global problem, not, just in the United States. We've been lazy and, just doing the same old, the same old way. And well, if you keep on doing, what do they say?
Yeah.
Einstein, if you keep on doing what you've been doing, you'll keep on getting what you've been getting. And that's, you're just flushing money down the toilet. Not to mention the aggravation and the morale and the productivity problems that come with it.
So I want to set a scene, and I'm going to allow you to walk us through this. We're going to kind of play this out because I believe in setting the scene the way I'm going to set it, because I believe the veteran leader, it serves a veteran leader well to go back to the beginner's mind. In other words, oftentimes, leaders will say, well, I'm already in this system, it's hard to change. Well, at that point, you need to go back like you're recreating. And so the scene we're going to create is a new business, a new entrepreneur, a new organization. Someone is sitting there, or a small team of people, and they're saying, we need to design our culture. We need to create our vision, our mission, our goals. What elements of the conversation should the strategy of hiring take during those early stages? At what point do those creators go, okay, we're not just going to cast this vision, mission, culture, and then fill in the blanks. We're going to actually be really strategic about the hiring persona, about the hiring strategies, and about where we're going to find those people?
That's a really big question.
Yeah.
So first of all,
I like those, by the way. I love big questions.
Yeah, that's great. Defining what culture you want is really, really important, because you're going to want to hire people that are going to fit into that culture. And I'm not talking about lookalikes and feel-alikes. I'm talking, and even think-alikes. I am talking, though, about commitment. You're going to want to hire people who are committed to your mission, your vision, your values, and the culture that you want to create. So if we're starting with the beginning person, we need to start at that beginning. I'm going to say, I think you can translate, let's say, wherever you are in this process.
Yes.
So then I created 8 factors that I think everybody for every job should be looking at. Now, you're going to weigh them differently depending on the job. If it's a CEO, you're going to weigh some more heavily than others. If it's a frontline person at a takeout place, you might weigh them differently and take not as much time as you will have to take for a more senior position or a more technical position or what have you. But the bottom line is across the board, these things matter. And I'd be happy to share them with you if you're wanting to go there.
Let us know the information. We want to know. Yeah.
Okay, so we've established the fact that even before you do the job posting, you got to think about how you word that so that you're going to pull in the people, reach out to the people wherever even if you're using a recruiter. How you position yourselves as an employer is going to be really important in terms of pulling in the kinds of people that you're going to be wanting to look at. And then it really is, if you come from a relational model rather than a transactional model. Let's see if we can get 100 candidates in and then we've got them, blah, blah, blah. No, it's how do you want to create a successful relationship with the successful candidate? So how do you know you have a successful candidate? And I have a lot of additional stuff in my resources section in the book. I'll just give you the brief 8 so that it's A through H. It's really easy to remember. So I'm going to go through them real fast and then I'll go back real quick. Okay.
Love it.
And just explain them. So it's attitude, brains, character, drive, emotional intelligence, fit, gut, and heart. So A through H, right? 8 factors.
Right.
All right. So attitude, Mitch, is about assessing the passion that this person has about the work that you're going to hire them for. Now, some jobs people will have less passion than others, but they need to at least be interested. And they want you want them to have an attitude, a can-do attitude, a solution, not blame attitude, and really wanting to help themselves and others and the organization succeed. So what's that attitude? And there are lots of, I have metrics of how you can, questions that you can ask to assess that.
Right.
Then brains is, well, are they capable of doing the job or learning how to do the job? Because it depends. And you could get somebody right off the street, right? And they've never done it before, but are they capable of learning how to do it and then executing on what they learn? Character, this is really core values, and it's really important to find this out. And there are ways to do that in a very thoughtful and graceful way. Bottom line, are they trustworthy? Do they have integrity? And you need to know that, because if they're not trustworthy, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. And then drive is really looking at their own motivation. You know, are they waiting for you to tell them everything, or are they able to self-start? Emotional intelligence is the 4 pieces: self-awareness, managing their own emotions, social awareness, and then managing relationships. There are 12 factors in the and you'll notice, if you think about it, a lot of these have emotional intelligence competencies woven into them.
Right.
And then fit is not about whether they look like you or sound like you. Right. This isn't against any kind of diversity, equity, inclusion model. This is in fact, I would say, if you have a good diversity inclusion model in your organization, fit is even more important. Yes. Like, are they going to be a person who welcomes other people and tolerant and care about the mission and the culture that you want to create? Gut is about you, the hiring leader. So some people go way too far with gut, and some people don't pay attention to it at all. They get too metric oriented. So you do need to pay attention to your instincts, because if something's niggling at you, boy, I'll tell you, you better pay attention to it. You or your search team's gut. And then finally,
you're right almost every time, by the way.
Yes,
you're right almost every time.
And you can't let it be. You can't because there could be something about you.
Yes.
Like, this person could remind you of your Uncle Ted, right?
Yes. Yep.
And they're not your Uncle Ted.
Yep.
And you couldn't stand your Uncle Ted. So you need to dig deeper. When your instinct is saying something's wrong here, then that's the sign to dig deeper. Is it that, or is it something else? Right. And then heart is finally we get to heart. This is about what kind of human being this person is. Jack Welch called it really the game changer. He referred to it, his terms were the generosity gene. My word for it is heart. So, is this person grounded? Are they humble enough to admit their mistakes? What are you noticing about how they are in the world? And there are a lot of ways to find that out in terms of how you interact with them from the very beginning all the way through interview processes, et cetera, et cetera. So pay attention to the little things, to the signals, because as Maya Angelou once said so well, when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
Right.
The crazy thing is, Roxy, and there are many voices, including you and I, in the world that are preaching this message. And that message is, you hire based on the intangibles. You can teach the tangibles.
Right. That's right.
The problem, and your list is full of the intangibles. They're full of the things that you cannot teach. Zig Ziglar used to say, you can't teach attitude and aptitude.
Right. You can't teach integrity.
You can't. It's there, or people choose to have those things. And many of the things that you're talking about, we're mentioning culture, and I talk about culture a lot. Many of the things that you're talking about are a very reflection of the culture that human was raised in, believes in. It's in their DNA.
Yeah.
And those are not that it's impossible to shift to those, but it is very difficult to shift those. And even though we're out to better humanity, as a leader, boss, CEO, manager, it's not my job to change people. It's my job to believe the story they're telling me. And so that's what I love about that list specifically, is that it is a list that if you hire the person that fills every single one of those, you're going to have an incredible teammate for your team. Incredible.
Absolutely.
If you miss any of those, miss one or two, potentially you could have a pretty good teammate. You miss 3 or more, it is not going to work.
That's right. And there are a couple that if you miss them,
they're
never going to work.
They're non-negotiables.
Like character.
Yes.
Like character. Well, and brains too. I'm not going to say that doesn't matter, because the person needs to be technically able or capable of at least learning the job. Now, emotional intelligence you can teach.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And if they're so far off the scale of emotional intelligence, then you have to decide whether it's worth your time and effort to do that. And fit, if they're not going to fit into your culture, their character won't, their attitude won't, whatever, their heart won't, then
not going to work.
Not going to work. And the thing is that, people say, well, what are the questions to ask to find out about attitude? Well, I got a ton of them. I got questions for all 8 of these factors that will at least prime the pump and get you started. And you should be winding those into your process anytime you're interacting with this candidate through the interviews or whatever, virtual or otherwise.
So a few questions. First of all, that list is amazing. And for any of the listeners that you are in a hiring position, I'm imploring you to, at minimum, re-listen to that list and write it down and use that as your roadmap, not only for hiring people, but for anyone you align with in life outside of employees.
Oh, yeah. Well, think about your date.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Right.
Exactly
Attitude,
right.
brains, character, drive, emotional intelligence, fit, gut, heart. Don't you want to know those?
That's the list.
And none of them carry the day. None of them carry the day all by themselves. There has to be a mix of these for it to be successful.
Yeah, it's almost like a syncope. Like that is what the human is made of, are those characteristics. And it really is, at the end of the day, about character. It leads me to a few questions that the listeners might be considering right now. And the first question is, so we just gave, well, let me back up a little bit more. Which book are those in? So people know which are those in the higher.
Yeah. Hire Right, Fire Right, your leader's guide to finding and keeping your best people.
Good. So instead of digging any deeper into that, because I want to go, there's a few questions on my mind that I think people are probably thinking of. They can go order that book. It's available anywhere. Go order that book. It'll dive deeper. It'll give you some material. That's amazing. The first question is, let's say someone hears that list and they order your book and they love your stuff. And they're like, yeah, I want to do that. The question then becomes, as an interviewer, what is the best way for them to hone those skills of being able, again, say they get your book, they read the questions, they see the resources, they're excited about the process, they believe in the process, but there's a difference in believing and actually achieving. And so give us a few little tips and tricks that someone, after they order your book after this show, that they could put into practice to begin really practicing that process of interviewing and applying to that interviewee.
Mitch, that's a great question, because that's the question I asked myself as I was writing the book. I wrote the book with the idea that the reader would come in with either a whole lot of old habits that they wanted to change, or no knowledge at all. So you mentioned the word roadmap earlier, and that's exactly how I set the book up. I have a roadmap for the a whole beginning process. So the book's in 3 sections, really. The first section is really getting, finding that person, right? Hiring that person. The second is retaining that person. And the third is saying goodbye to that person, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. Both happen. Every employee has a lifespan, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to start somewhere and you're going to end somewhere at some point. So
we all do it.
We all do it. But even self-employed people stop being self-employed at some point. All right. So I guess the answer to your question is, I have a very clear roadmap of how to. This is a very how-to book. And of course, people can reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to engage with them and help them walk through it. I'll give you an example. One of my colleagues bought the book, and she had never fired anybody in her life, and she had to fire somebody, and she really didn't know what to do. And she thought, well, before I call Roxi, I'm going to read that section of the book. She followed it step by step by step, and she said it was easily the best experience. She was really dreading it. She was a nervous wreck, and it turned out just fine. So I really do think that the setup, the tips and tricks are all in there. They're all in there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I will say, friends, if you decide to get Roxi's book, make sure you practice before you implement, because that practice and that role play is so powerful because it does take a comfort level. I'll never forget the first time I had to fire someone. And I was what, 21 years old, running a multi-million-dollar business with a team of people, and I had to fire someone. And you're talking about a guy that, that is a pastor at heart, former pastor. Well, I didn't want to fire anyone. That's the worst thing I wanted to do. And no one enjoys that.
Yeah. It's
and
painful.
So it is, but it's also in a different way as scary to hire people, because, if you take it seriously, that person is depending on you as a resource for their way of life.
That's right. Right.
And that goes back to your foundational statement in the beginning of the show, is that this is about relationships. We are all human beings. We're not transactions.
That's right.
And that's a little bit where I get, which was going to lead me to another question a while ago. I get a little bit frustrated with the role of technology in recruiting and hiring, because it removes the human element. And you mentioned
it can be lazy.
Well, that's what you mentioned earlier. And that's that's the exact word I use as well, is that it is lazy. And so what can someone do, and I think it's regardless of size of company. I get the larger a company is, technology plays more of a role. I understand that. But 98% of businesses that support the North American economy are small business.
That's right.
75% of those are mom and pop shops.
That's right.
Teams of 20 or less.
Yep.
So we're really talking about people that are going to buy your book and implement. So what can those people do in this day and age of, we throw it on Indeed, we throw it on Glassdoor, we throw it on Monster, we throw it on Facebook, and we try and crapshoot the hiring process. If someone's in the middle of that, what can they do to really begin negotiating a new way of recruiting and hiring people?
Yeah, I call it the post and pray method.
Yes, that's exactly. We used to call it the shotgun approach, because you shoot and you hopefully you get something.
Right. Well, if you're not using a recruiting firm, which most people are not.
Most are not.
90% of them are not. Right. So if you're not using a recruiting firm, there's so many. I mean, I think it's there's stages in this process. And the first stage is really crafting that announcement to the world that you have a job open, and where are you going to put it? And then the second stage is, how are you going to vet those people that respond? But even how you're going to put it out to the world. Well, you have employees. Employees know people. They have social networks. They have all kinds of Instagrams and Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of things. YouTube. They're all over the place. So none of us are sitting here on an island by ourselves. So I would certainly, if you love your culture and you love the employees you have, and you want to find the right person to come in and fulfill a new role or replace someone who's left, talk to your employees.
Yes.
Talk to your employees, ask them about their networks, maybe make it an incentive. I know small and mid-sized companies often provide incentives for employee referrals.
Yes.
So there is a danger there, though. And the danger in that is that we're all going to look alike, sound alike. We come from the same class, we come from the same race, we come from the same gender. So be careful about that. And I talk about bias in hiring in my book as well, and how to prevent it, whether you're using technology or you having a human who's looking at resumes or applications. So it's really important to think through that first process, and then how you're going to vet them. And then now we're into your search team, which is also an answer to the question you asked me before, is don't try to do this on your own.
Mm-hmm.
People do way too much of this on their own. Many heads is good in this
Yes.
situation. Many eyes is good in this situation. Many hearts good in this situation. So, if you, even one other person is better than just doing it yourself. But think about your search team as you are thinking about how to get started and what to look for. I have a whole checklist of, before you even announce this job, what you should have done before the world even knows you have this job. And you can set that up so it repeats itself. It's work at the front end, but boy, it saves you a lot of time at the back end.
It really automates. And that's where that idea of practicing this and working through it before you take action really allows you to automate. Now, there's going to be, quote, human automation. It's going to be the same behaviors and actions taken over and over in time. And that's okay. But it really does streamline the process.
It does when you set it up and you say, these are the must do's. Here's our free checklist. We're not going to even put that job out there until we've done this. Yes. And I have a whole checklist, a pre-checklist, and then, and lots of checklists. I love
that. I love that. Roxi, I have this belief that people can get it right 80 to 90% of the time.
They can.
I've lived it. I've done it. I've gotten it wrong and I've gotten it right. And I know they can get it right that much. And all of the information that you've given, and I know your book is filled with anecdotes and recipes and systems and processes. And it really takes voices like you and I preaching the same message to get people to really pay attention. You don't have to go about it the way everyone else is going about it. There is a better way.
Well, it's an advantage. It's a business advantage to do it differently than everybody else is doing. It's a competitive advantage. And, I've mapped out all of this stuff, and I know you have too, Mitch, to help people with tons of resources. And the thing is that you can customize them.
That's right.
It's not Roxy's model, but it's Roxy's tips and tricks, Mitch's tricks, methodology. And what works for you is going to work for you. Take what you want, but at least you've got a good mapping out of how to proceed and the kinds of things to think about, whether you're hiring, onboarding, or letting somebody go.
Well, that's exactly why leaders need to constantly be learners, because, someone is going to read your book and your voice is going to resonate with them incredibly. That's one thing I love about the show is I don't try and find people that align with my content on purpose, but they always do, because A, that's kind of how the law of attraction works.
Yeah.
But B, my desire is to find people that are giving those positive messages, but in a different language, because we need different languages. We need different voices. And so leaders, I really want leaders listening to understand that if you can continue to be a learner, Roxy's voice is going to resonate with some, my voice is going to resonate with others. You and I were talking about other guests that have been on that's why it's so important to constantly be curious and be exploring and be learning and be figuring all this out. Because you and I are going to say the exact same thing, but our experience, our life, and our story tells it differently. And that's a beautiful, which goes to the fact of that diversity that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it goes to the fact of, you can be an interviewer, you can hire someone to interview for you, but don't just depend on that one interpretation.
Oh, exactly.
Because it may, something, that ringing bell may not quite be right. And so, have some diversity in your leadership team and then the people that are hiring as well.
The search team, that, the thing that you said earlier about having a beginner's mind, I'm a coach as well. I'm an executive coach and a leadership coach. And one of the things that I try to help my clients do as they're really thinking about who they are and where they want to go is getting into a curiosity place, a
Yes.
beginner's mind, a learner's mind, because don't just think you know it all, because you don't.
Right.
None of us do. So let's figure out where the problem is.
Yeah.
And we don't need to solve a problem that doesn't exist, but this problem does exist,
Yeah.
and it exists for nearly everybody.
Yes.
And man, if you want to have a competitive advantage, start hiring right.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But then
Roxi,
there's retention. There's
there
retention.
is. We'll have a part two of our conversation, and we'll talk about retention, because we're not telling everyone yet, but we do have something we've already talked about, collaborating on and have you on in the future. And so maybe retention on our future project will be our first move, because you're exactly right. That is a big challenge. So
It is, and people are worried about it a lot, especially now.
But the reality is, until you get the front end right, retention doesn't matter, because if you don't have the conversation we just had right, you're not like, it's not going to work either
they're
way.
going to ghost you, man. They're going to ghost you, or they're going to show and go. I mean, that happens a lot. It happens a lot.
So here's the deal we're making with the listeners. Listen to this episode a few times, go buy Roxi's book, and then we'll come back to retention, and it'll make a lot more sense. So
awesome.
I love it. Roxi, this has been amazing. Conversation has a lot of depth, but also a lot of applicable, very simple steps that people can take. So thank you for coming on the show. I'd love for you to leave our listeners with one last small bit of advice. You get to choose.
Well, that's tough for me, because I have, so much advice.
I know you do. And we love it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to end where we started, is just remember that the people that are going to be getting a paycheck from you aren't just getting a paycheck. They're people. They're 24-hour people. They're all different. They're complex. Leading people is messy, and leading the right people is less messy. So make it a priority. Make it a priority to really, really get your hiring right.
I love that. Thank you so much, Roxi, for coming on the show. It's been great. I know people have gotten some incredible value today. So, brothers and sisters, thank you for listening to the Mitch Gray Show. Please go order Roxi's book. We'll also have that in the link in the show notes and profile page as well. Hire Right, Fire Right. It's available anywhere. And while you're there, throw her other book in the cart too, and grab it. So like I always encourage people, check with your local bookstore first and see if they can order it for you. We love to support locally owned businesses. And if they can't, then I'm sure it's Amazon, Goodreads, wherever you, Barnes and Noble, wherever you order books. So make sure you subscribe to our show, spread the word, and invite one or two people to subscribe as well. Leave us a review anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the Mitch Gray YouTube channel. That's Mitch Gray Media. And again, check out our website, recruitgreatpeople.com. And there you'll find some great tools, very similar to, you'll probably look at our website and think Roxi wrote it, because it's all the same stuff and we love it. So thanks again. And we hope you have a great day. We will talk to you soon.